I'm Sarah. Let's see. Something that I sometimes will disclose to people is that I guess is my long-term goals. So the fact that I want to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner and want to go into the mental health field. This disclosure has been interesting because it usually sparks a lot of conversation, and also sometimes we'll end up with the person also disclosing information to me about their mental health, their goals. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations that come of it. And then something that people disclose to me that definitely makes me feel like more connected to them is when people open up to me about like grief or loss. I think that's something that's a really kind of meaningful and difficult part about life. And so when they disclose that information, it definitely makes me feel more connected. And also something that I can relate to because I lost my brother pretty recently. And then in terms of the Johari window for of self disclosure, in the open section, I think most people right away would describe me as pretty friendly and outgoing. So that's something that I know about myself and other people know. Something that I think is was a blind spot for me at some point, or still is but something that other people know just by watching me is my compulsive behaviors. So I know I can be pretty fidgety and have sometimes have a funny way of walking or have just mannerisms that I are subconscious and I don't notice them. But probably there are things that my friends notice or, are obvious to them. And then a hidden item is, oh, just that I actually do have been diagnosed with being on the bipolar spectrum. So I do have depressive times, which is typically something that I only disclose, of course, if it's something that I know really well or if it's the right setting. And so that's typically a hidden item, especially because people tend to think that I'm pretty friendly and positive and outgoing. And then the unknown item I would say is that I've discovered I'm a pretty good painter. I never went to art school and I just started painting recently as a hobby, and I've gotten a lot of good positive feedback. So that's an unknown item that has come up recently. And then let's see. In terms of the influences on perception, I would say the one that resonates the most with me is the psychological challenges. So, again, I mentioned that I have a diagnosis of being on the bipolar spectrum and then also ADHD. And the ADHD definitely has a lot of impact on my communication. Because I have an ADHD and ADHD people tend to be more compulsive and reactive and excitable. It's really hard for me to not interrupt people in conversations and to respond very excitedly. And I have to, especially at work, be very cognizant of kind of holding back and listening and not interrupting. And I think a lot of that has to do with my ADHD. And then a common tendency of perception that resonates the most with me is that others are similar to me. So, this is something I've thought a lot about as I've gotten older and worked in many different jobs with many different people. And when I was younger, I was very naive and optimistic and thought that everybody else thought like me. Um, and as I've gotten older and have had to work with people that I maybe wouldn't normally be friends with, or people that are normally, I guess, not like me, it's been really interesting to kind of navigate interpersonal relationships and figure out that when you're collaborating with people at work, you really have to be mindful of the fact that they don't totally think the way that you do, and so might not understand you or have the same opinion when you're working with them on a work project. And so this comes up a lot, um, yeah, at work. And I guess a specific example of that, let's see, would be actually working with my current boss. She is incredibly thoughtful and strategic, and is the opposite of me in terms of not being compulsive with her decisions, which is really helpful for me to learn from, but it's definitely not how I function. I tend to be make decisions very quickly and take action really quickly, which can be helpful in some instances where we need things to get done right away. But then in other instances, it's much more helpful when she's able to jump in and kind of take the time to strategize and be thoughtful so that we can do things correctly and think about kind of all of the long term impacts. So that's definitely a place where we're really different. And in the past, I would have just assumed that everybody is thinks similarly, but an example of where we don't at all. But that both ways of thinking can also be really valuable. Thank you.